My name's Erin while I'm doing this, and this is Jesse. Jesse's our
Hi
CEO.
guys, nice to
And
meet you.
once we get going here, we're gonna talk a little bit about earning money. So Jesse graciously gave us some time today to talk a little bit about earning extra money because we're kind of in a weird place right now. And I know that there's a bunch of people in here, Jesse. We've got a little over 500 people in the group now, and people dealing with different statuses of job loss. Some people have lost their jobs completely. Some people have just had some dips in income. But one of the things that you and I have talked about over the years since we've known each other, I know you've helped me a lot, is just that you can create your own income. And I think that's something that we don't hear a lot about. We hear a lot about people going to look for other jobs and what's available for work. And Ben and I talked a little bit about that here last week. But I know that you were someone that dealt with a shortfall back
Yeah,
before you started YNAB, and it was the fact that you were short a little bit, and that's what led you to where we are right now. So
yeah,
maybe you could talk a little bit about how that moment of stress and that feeling of, oh my gosh, we don't have enough money coming in right now, led you to create something for yourself.
yeah. And to be perfectly honest, when I first realized we'd been budgeting, we'd been using this little spreadsheet that I'd built that we had no thoughts of ever trying to tell anyone else they needed something like that. But
Tragedy.
Julie and I, we were married about, gosh, less than a year when we decided we'd have a baby. And then, once you decide that, then the baby's on the way and there's no stopping that train. The baby's coming. So, um, Julie's big desire, and I'd known this while we were dating, her big desire was she wanted to just be full-time all in, stay at home, be there with the baby 100% of the time. And she was our breadwinner. I was finishing school and she was the one supporting the family.
Wow.
And she was doing a good job of it, and we were saving a little bit of money each month. But we were going to switch roles, and she was going to stay home and I was going to be the one
Sure.
in charge of that. Um and so I'm looking at our savings pile, and I was pretty proud of what we've been able to put aside for the prior year, still in school. And then I knew that we had about 2.5 years of schooling for me left. And I simply took our pile of money, divided by the number of months, and I recognized this is how much that pile can contribute until we're done, with school, and I can get a real job and no problems ever again after that. And we were going to be short about $350 a month. Ironically, or not ironically, but coincidentally, our rent was $350 a month. So it was this very real number for us.
Real tangible.
But I was sitting on a wedding gift actually that had been given to us. It was a Dr. Pepper cooler. Like, it was a cooler, like, you'd put drinks in or ice, but it was it was a Dr. Pepper can, but it was large, so like it was our seat for our desk. I remember sitting on that, and I was sitting at the desk, and I had a big thick laptop, because they were all really thick back then, crunching these numbers. And I remember feeling actually very mad at the whole situation. I didn't feel like it was fair that we had been living so tight for a year, and just really, we didn't have a honeymoon. Like, we were just $5 a month. We would get a Little Caesars pizza. Like, there was just not a lot of wiggle room. We didn't have phones. And I was mad because I just like, this isn't fair. We've been doing everything right. We're living super frugal, and we're still short. So my first reaction was just being really upset at the situation. But all that being said, and I think it was totally legitimate to feel that way.
Yeah.
But all that being said, that feeling of we have a shortfall, we need to make it up, that led me to think maybe we could sell this little spreadsheet that I'd built just to make enough to get through school, to cover that shortfall. So, and it's always can sound a little trite or a little hand wavy to be like, oh, in your worst times, that's when the best things happen. Because you don't want to hear that if things are super stressful.
Yeah.
But that was the case for us. I didn't like where we were at. I didn't like feeling like I had failed Julie, or that she was going to bear a lot of stress and have this baby come, and we would have all this to deal with. But that was the reality. And luckily we came up with something that ended up working out.
I'm curious, did you ever consider getting another job, or were you already working a couple jobs, or did you consider anything else? Like,
I did. My first thought was I'll work more hours. Yeah, I
right,
was working I was working in the internal audit department as an intern, and I could have worked more hours for them. In the accounting program I was in, they did not allow you to work. Well, they said you're not allowed to work, but you could just ignore that. So I had already been ignoring that and was working about 20 hours a week. But the course load was pretty heavy,
sure,
and the grades mattered because that was part of my scholarship, and that was real money. So I
right,
knew I needed to keep my grades up in order to have that subsidized slightly. So yeah, my first thought was more hours, but then immediately it was like, I don't think I can do, like,
right,
physically, I don't know if I can do more hours.
yeah. But you found
So
time for this, you know what I mean? So I just think it's
yeah,
interesting, and this is what we were talking about a little bit before, where I think a lot of people really discount that they have something of value to offer to the world, whether that's
yeah,
a product or a service or a skill or something, but you seem to have some confidence there that you have.
yeah, yeah. There's just enough. You have to have just enough ego to put something out there to sell, right?
Yeah,
You have to have, it's a weird balance because you're kind of saying, what I have, you need. And there's a little bit of pride there. And I think we all naturally think, well, no, this is so easy for me. There's no way that someone would pay for this. There's a woman in our old neighborhood, every Thanksgiving, my favorite food is pie. Every Thanksgiving, she would put out a thing on Facebook saying, I'm taking orders, and I would order as many pies as Julie would say is allowed. And they were so good, and she would charge such a little amount for them.
right,
And it took me a long time to convince her that not everyone can make a perfect pie like she can, and that we will pay handsomely for that pie, you know? So people, because you know a thing, you immediately discount it because you know it.
right,
But I hire a plumber to fix things because I've caused my own share
right,
of issues by not knowing what I'm doing. And I will pay for that happily. I'll pay for an
right,
electrician happily.
right.
Because when but the electrician will always say, oh, it's so easy. Well, no, it's not the case at all,
Not easy
right?
for you. Right, yeah, yeah.
So I firmly believe that everyone has something that someone else would happily pay for.
Mhm. I also think that, like, because you inspired me a little bit to get my own little side hustle going.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first, I for those of you, I won't get into the whole thing, but I made these workbooks for kids when I was a public school teacher. And I remember saying to you, well, what if I repackage them and reorganize? And you were like, do you have one book right now that you can put? And I put it up online, and somebody bought it the next day, and I was excited, but also horrified, because you're like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, so it's out there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I do think there was a level of confidence that gives you, like, if you have a little idea, because it just generates a little gravy money for me, but it's nice. But it's also this way of saying, I generated this money myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, can be really a really empowering thing for a lot of people,
Yeah. There's something very empowering about having
Mhm.
a source of income outside even if it's small, it doesn't have to be
Right,
large, but there's something really empowering about that. What's interesting is the first time anyone ever bought a copy of YNAB, and for the first year and a half, it was just a spreadsheet that I was just selling. This was
uh,
back
you
before
know, I bought
phones and
it.
apps,
I bought
so but the very first person that bought it actually had to have a refund. It wouldn't work on their computer. So
But
you
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 persevered.
gotta put it out there.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah,
is. But you persevered through that. So did you just feel like you had something there? Is that,
just enough.
just enough?
You just Yeah, just enough. If you were to have had me glimpse what we have now and say, hey, you'll need to build this, it needs to be done by 2020, I would have been mortified. I think frozen with like, I don't even know where to start.
Right.
But because my goal was so small, I just needed to make the $350.
Right.
That was approachable. And sometimes we think, oh, I have to replace my whole income. Well, no, you don't. You don't
Yeah.
have to replace your whole income. Just have a little bit
Right.
and see what the next idea is or the next version of that idea is. And your little side hustle has morphed over the years from
Yep.
that
Yep.
original idea. But you would have never started where you are now and just jumped right to that
Oh
point.
gosh, and I
They're
wouldn't have
all
known what the heck
very,
I was doing. Yeah, yeah.
very small steps.
But the small amount of money, you say you were just looking for 350, you know, for some people, 350, 400, $500 could be a game-changing amount of money.
It was. Yeah.
Especially like you look, I think that the world is going to rebuild itself a little bit. I think there are going to be some shifts out of this that we don't even know yet.
Yeah.
But one of them I think might be that some people might go, you know what, there were two of us working and now one of us is home and that's good. And but a little
Hmm.
difference of a small side hustle, $300-400 might be just enough to make it say, we'll let go of that second one because this is just enough, and the other benefits of having one person home, or it
Yeah.
could morph into a whole other career for somebody. You know,
Absolutely.
it's really, I can't, you know, I've tried to think a lot as we've gone through this group, like, what would I be feeling if I suddenly lost my job? I've never lost a job, you know, like, and I
Hmm.
think that I would be feeling depressed and I would
Yeah.
feel some despair and certainly lost, particularly this job, which I love so much. But I like to think that there's something in me that would get scrappy and want to, I think that there's something empowering about, oh, I'm going to do something here for myself. And maybe I had to take this other thing for a while, but I'm gonna still work on this and
Hmm.
empower myself a little bit. You were working on YNAB really early because you still had that CPA job, right?
Yeah. Yeah. YNAB was a side gig for me from 2004. And then I was still working as an intern all through 2006. And then late 2006, I started with a real job after I finished school with a CPA firm, still working on YNAB
Yeah,
in like from 4 to 5 a.m. because the hours for the accounting firm were horrible. But yeah, 4 to 5 a.m., 5:15 was my one window of time, which sounds horrific now. I think I was, I mean, I'm not that old, but I did have a longer wick back then. Like I could, like there was
me
more I
too.
could burn. I felt like I didn't seem to question it. Like, oh my gosh, that's not sustainable. I just was kind of doing it.
Right,
Or it could be that the situation required it, and we naturally just rise to the occasion. And
right.
it could be some of that where you just have this natural scrappiness that I had something on the side. It was growing, but I was so afraid to say I'm going to feed this 2-year-old and 0-year-old and lovely wife with this income. Like I was mortified at the thought of I'm the sole, like this little nascent joke of a business is the sole provider for these humans. So I couldn't even go there. It
Yeah,
took some serious prodding from many different people, and some like almost, you can't be serious. I can't believe you aren't focusing on this types of conversations.
right,
Because I was really worried about having to be the sole thing. But the nice thing was I could have it gradually build and have it be
right,
gravy for a comfortably long time
right.
until about 2009. So I was about 5 years with it, totally on the side. Although I will say this, once I went all in on it full time, it did dramatically improve the business.
Mhm.
Just being able to focus on it completely. So there is something to be said about
Right.
going all in when the
Well, that
time's
was
right.
true of, I mean, I worked for you part-time for, I think, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
And there was something dramatic, felt dramatically different when I finally wasn't living in two worlds, you know, when I finally was
yeah,
full-time. So I wonder, I would love to, if anyone has any comments or questions too while we're talking, just type them on
oh
over. We're
yeah.
happy to, if you have an idea you want to put out there, and we're happy to give you some feedback on it. But yeah, so what kind of mistakes do you think people make when they're starting something on the side? I'm sure you have thoughts
There,
about this.
yeah. One is starting with too big of a goal. To like you got to start small. Another one is thinking that you have to jump through a lot of bureaucracy to make money. I mean, it's funny how my dad, who was an attorney, kind of always just did small work and stuff. he had a funny story about two people that they rented office space next to him, and they opened up this paralegal place where they could provide services, and they were right next to these attorneys, so it seemed like a good spot. He remembers observing these two people, just, I mean, shingle on the door, brand new. One is they decided they needed to have an office, which actually was not necessarily the case. They had letterhead, they had a logo, they had designated when each of them could take breaks during the day, and they had no work. So so we have this tendency, when we have this idea, we want to, like, I call it playing business. So you want to sit where it's safe in your house, and you want to think through the plan instead of walking down the street and knocking on the door and asking someone if they would like to buy what you have to offer.
That's the harder thing.
And so my boy, he's almost 16, Porter, you know, Porter, he was saying, Dad, I want to make donuts and sell. And this is all, I don't know if it's COVID approved, you know, what he was thinking, but we'll just pretend. And he was like, Dad, I want to make donuts in the neighborhood. And I said, okay. He goes, so I'm going to make like I'm going to 3X the recipe and make like 200 donuts. I said, why don't you go and take orders? Then he was so uninterested in that. He just wanted to like feel like he was doing the work, but the hardest work was obviously making the sales. He did actually sell about 200 donuts, so it worked out. But that one mistake is people kind of playing business, incorporating an LLC before you've even made money and stuff like that. That's one.
I remember, I mean, my side hustle was I sell to schools, and it wasn't until a school said, we need an invoice to process this purchase order.
Yeah.
I guess I should make an invoice.
Yeah.
You know.
And then what do? You Google invoice template and you change a few things and you send it along, right?
Right. But in the meantime, I had been focusing on creating this, what I thought was useful content for teachers, you know, and I think that's the more important piece of it, I think, too. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
It would be, I mean, the author that thinks that they're going to write a book or imagines writing a book versus the one that sits down and even writes for 30 minutes is a big difference.
Right.
But that's one mistake that people make, is just you know what the hard thing is, because it's usually the thing you're resisting, right? Yeah. The other mistake that people make is they undercharge. So it's huge. I undercharged out of the gate. When I first started YNAB, we were trying to sell this. There was no we at the time. I was trying to sell the spreadsheet for $9.95, and nobody was buying it, because $9.95 is like it's like a fast food meal. You know, it's just not that valuable. So I had a friend tell me that's way too cheap. No one will ever buy that. So I doubled it. I put a 1 in front of the 9, $19.95, and that was when we got our first sale, and then the next sale, and the next sale. So I didn't change a thing, just put the 1 in front. And people underestimate how much their potential customers will place value on the service based solely on price. So if you come in underpriced, you're actually turning people away. You don't want to start and say, I'm the low cost leader in fill in the blank business. There's just no way.
I think that goes back to the empowerment piece too, because I think it's also really empowering to say, no, I am worth what I am asking you for. I have
absolutely
this thing or built this thing or whatever it is, you know. And so, but I see this with teachers a lot too. I'll say, well, what is this? Oh, this is a cool group of lessons that you wrote. Oh, how come you did it? Do you use a book? Well, they don't really have what we need for this particular part of the concept. And I just felt like I needed to write my own thing. I said, you should sell that. Oh, nobody would buy it. I'm like, you just told me.
Yeah. You just told me you found it valuable.
That's right. Like, you know, so
yeah, it's absolutely true.
I would love to see everybody have a little bit of something that they generated themselves. I just think there's beyond the money, there's something valuable there.
Oh, there's a creator in each of us, I think, some form or another. Yeah. I have a friend who does really, really good muscle work on athletes and things, and she'll fix, like, if you have an ultra runner and they're like, my hip hurts, she fixes them. Or you have a CrossFitter, like, my shoulder hurts, she fixes them. And I would go to her regularly because I found it so great. So we're chatting one time, and I said, "You charge too little." And she goes, "Well, why would you tell me to raise my price? You're one of my clients." And I said, "Well, tell me this. Do you ever have an unbooked hour?" She said, "No." I mean, she had a list of people that if she had a cancellation, she could just go start her list and someone else would say, "I'll be there in 20 minutes."
Wow.
And so I said, that is an indicator of your price being wrong. But then she said, "Well, I want to be able to help people. I don't want to just price someone out that really needs to have their ankle fixed or
Mhm.
name your thing." And I said, "Oh, no, no, just price appropriately because you're inappropriately priced. But then just give away services as you see fit."
Right.
And she texted me months later and said she raised her prices. And what's fantastic is she's a single mom. She's raising these two kids, and
Right.
I was like, you need to make money. Like, you make the money. You just like, you need to nail this. And she had this idea of like this identity wrapped up in, I could never. I'm just not worth that much. This service isn't worth that much. And she's like one of 3 people in the country that can do this. So anyway, she texted me later and said if she donated an hour to someone that needed it, that couldn't afford it, and how good it felt. And so instead of giving misguided charity to people that would happily pay more, she was able to give
Target.
laser focused, targeted charity to someone that genuinely needed it. So we all naturally tend to undervalue what is our expertise
Mhm.
every time.
Yeah. I mean,
Charge more.
yeah, I mean, I quilt for fun, but you look at a professional quilter and I mean, they should charge for the work that's involved, like you can, so I totally get what you're saying there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but going back to like the present situation, like I know that you did some other things like for a while, like you bought and sold websites for a little bit. Were you
Yeah.
just trying to bring in a little more, or did you feel like
Yeah.
you were still riding too close to the edge? Like what made you decide to do that?
I've always liked the idea of having multiple streams of income. And the way that Julie and I have set up our situation, I'm in charge of bringing in the money, and she's in charge of trying to raise these, not really completely raise the kids, but she has so much on her plate. So she handles the household, and I handle bringing the money in.
Mhm.
And I'd like to think we both handle the parenting, I guess. But I've always just been uncomfortable with the idea that there was a single source, and because I felt on the hook. And so I've naturally tried over the years to just always have other sources that are outside of YNAB, even where I mean, YNAB is obviously what I care most about, what I'm obsessed about, um, and is the best thing for us. But we over the years, I've been able to buy a little rental property where I thought,
Yeah.
well, I think I can do that. Or um, back in the day, flipping those websites and things. Now I couldn't even do it. I've been out of that for so long. But yeah, it was all just about trying to diversify
Mhm.
those
But every little
sources.
attempt like that, you learn to like, if I had to start another thing, it would be way easier this time
Yeah,
because you just
absolutely.
learn some things. We do have some questions that have come in.
Oh,
Um,
fun.
Paige was asking, how can we get over our fear of failure when considering starting a side hustle?
Yeah. Well, do they ever fail? I mean, does Paige ever fail at her job?
Right.
Or is that like just nailed perfect? Because then we should hire Paige. If Paige is perfect in her job, we would just hire Paige. So failure is everywhere, not just in a side hustle. Like I probably will fail tonight in some way with one of my kids. Like, oh, that
Right.
was a fail. So we fail everywhere. It's not a special failure because it's a side hustle.
Mhm.
It's just normal. Now, there's like all kinds of cliches, like you didn't fail, you just learned. Sometimes you made such a big mistake that it's like that's going to take a while to let go.
Yeah.
And it just is what it is because
Yeah.
you're alive and mistakes happen.
Right.
But I mean, one of our cultural values at YNAB is you get to change your mind.
Hmm.
And changing your mind a lot of the time is I fought for this for 6 months and now I think the opposite, right?
I've
Someone would say, oh my
yeah.
gosh, look at all the time you wasted. Like, what a failure. No.
Right.
Or we think this will work for our customers. We think this feature will be just right. What do? We put it out just today. Just today, we had Alan come back with some feedback about something that I can't even talk about probably. And it was like, well, we had a feeling that we're glad we surfaced this in data. Is everyone like, DMing Alan in Slack, like, I can't believe you did that? No, because we have to try. If Paige really wants to get some motivation, she should go to archive.org in the Wayback Machine, and she should look up YNAB, and she should see the garbage that was the original YNAB site, right?
Yeah.
Aaron, it was horrible.
I know, but it got you someplace, right?
It only had to sell to a few. It had to be good enough to convince you, so you could say, hey, Jesse, I could help you with this, and then
right.
we could bring you on. And I mean, for all I know, maybe you would have been intimidated to ask me to help out if it would have been this super polished, not illustrated thing we have now. But back then you were like, this guy clearly could use some help. And you wrote in, right? So I'm not saying everything happens for a reason, because sometimes we just fall on our face flat. But mistakes, failure, I mean, it is a daily part of living. And they happen everywhere, and they happen with side hustles, and it's all the same thing. You just keep moving.
I also remember you telling me in the early days that when things we would try something and it wouldn't go well, that we're invisible right now. We're so little.
Yeah.
And so when you start a small idea, I've always remembered that with my little, because I remember at one point on my website, I had a really long copy on the front page, and then I shortened it, and my sales evaporated. There was like a period of months where it just I seemed like I had disappeared from the internet. And I realized that long copy was really important. So how many months went by where but then you learn, and I'm like, well, I'm not making any giant mistakes right now because nobody even really knows I'm out here. I'm in this little corner of, so I would say to Paige, you're just testing an idea.
Yeah,
maybe I want to walk dogs. See if you can walk 2 dogs. See how you like it. Like you're just testing a little thing, And then I do think, like you said, I wouldn't have built what I have today, or neither would you if someone had told you to start from that. So how liberating is that? Just start with whatever little idea you have. She was also saying, if we are debating between 2 ideas for a side hustle, what are some questions we could ask ourselves to figure out which idea to go with?
I would launch them both. The key is to get to money as fast as you can. You have to have someone pay you as fast as possible, because payment is validation. Nothing else is valuable. Asking your mom what she thinks of your idea is the least valuable, and then it goes from there. So it really, you have to get to money. So if one of those ideas has you faster to money, then that's the one I would go with first, because then you're faster to validate whether it has legs or not.
Right.
But that's the big measuring stick is like today, this guy said, do you have Venmo? Because I have to pay him for this design. Do you have Venmo? That would be your number one question, is like, do you want me to send you my Venmo request? Then it's real, like you collecting money. So the even better is, well, why don't you Venmo me and then I'll get started, because now you're asking for money before you've even done anything. It's a prepayment. You're in a little bit of debt in that way, but it's validation, because they're like, well, no, I won't do that. Then But sending those requests, having someone prepay for what you're going to deliver, all those things get you to money faster. And that's the validator. Nothing else works to validate.
Yeah.
Nothing really works. Everything else is just saying this might work until money comes in.
Right. That's really true.
So,
yeah. And I think, like you said, your website looked horrible. I had these workbooks that, but it was enough to that first sale comes in, and then you're like, oh, wait, maybe I have some, maybe there's something interesting here. And I think that is almost, worth more than, like you say, asking 10 people, because then you realize maybe here's some real proof that I might have something. Here's real proof that my idea has some legs.
Yeah. And even while you made money, you were still making mistakes. You were still failing, because there are times we'll probably launch something in August that we will look back, because it's the most tested thing we've ever done at YNAB. We'll launch it, and then we'll look back and we'll say, I can't believe we ever made money without this.
Right.
And that's,
Yeah.
so then would we say, well, I can't believe we were failing the entire time? Not at all. So that's the key, is when you look back at those workbooks and you say, I can't believe I ever sold anything. That just means you've improved your product over time.
Right. Yeah. I remember we had a designer here saying, like, I said, these slides look so horrible now. And I look back at them. Well, that's because your eye's better.
Yeah.
I have to build these slide decks out. Well, now they look hard. I look back at the old ones, they look so bad. Well, that's the same thing. Like your first idea is not your last idea.
No.
It's just your first
tragedy.
iteration of something that you're trying to test, you know? So yeah, very cool. Great questions there. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, let's see. I got another one over here in Zoom. Starting somewhere, to say, Carla was saying, starting somewhere today is much better than starting someday.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Really well put, really well put.
Alan had something like a quote that he had internally. Did you see what it was like? Life by the inch is a cinch. Life by the yard is hard, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's the idea. Is like there's nothing that happens with these big leaps. Like these massive overnight successes took just thousands of iterations.
Right.
So you just have to remember that with whatever you're trying, that it's all iteration all the time,
Right.
in every aspect of life.
And also, like, starting smaller, you might hit a sweet spot early on and you're like, this is good. You know, I love animals. I wanted to walk. Maybe I thought about having a dog boarding facility, but you start walking 10 dogs and you're like, you know what? This is great.
Yeah.
I'm walking 10 dogs. That's enough. I don't need any more. That's enough for my life balance. And that's enough for like what it's bringing in for me. Like, you know, like it's a lot more work. I'm sure I don't have to tell you, to have a company with 100 people than it was when it was just you working at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. It's far more fulfilling with all the people, but it is more work.
Yeah. Let's see if there's anything else I was going to ask you about. I wanted to touch on I know you hate debt.
Yeah.
And I think that there may be people that find themselves in a situation right now where nothing's coming in and it's like, oh gosh, should I charge on the credit card for a while? Like, and you said you wouldn't do that. And I'm just going to let you talk about that a little bit. I mean, knowing that everybody's situation is different, but you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Here I'm speaking. A good radio personality has an opinion and never changes it.
Right.
Because if they did change it, they'd kind of be boring to listen to, you know? So I have to kind of preface this with, if we were speaking one-on-one and I could really dig into everyone's situation.
Absolutely.
It could be dynamic.
Right.
If it were me personally, and I am speaking from experience here because I was short a good bit of money, and I did not entertain the idea of debt. I'm glad I didn't. I needed about $7,000, and if we had that $7,000, that would have carried us through. And I could have gone to the university financial aid office and said, I need to borrow $7,000 for a master's degree in accounting with 99.8% job placement.
Right.
And it's just like, well, that seems like a darn reasonable thing.
Right.
And so all signs were pointing toward it being not just reasonable, but maybe even savvy to do it. But I do not like debt. And I think it's a creativity killer. I think it robs us of the strain that's required under serious resource constraint to come up with creative solutions. Right. Because a credit card is not a creative solution ever. Mm-hmm. Everybody does it. So by definition, it's what everybody does, not creative. So yeah, I would rather.
You're gonna get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and work on our website.
Not a lot of people do that.
That's not something everybody does. Right?
Yeah, not a lot of people do that. So that's the part where I feel like debt does the biggest disservice to society. Is it allows people to walk past that point of having no money, and then suddenly you have money, and then it's like you never feel. You can feel stressed about not having a job. We know that. Right. You can feel mad. You can feel like it's not fair. All of those things are valid. but you haven't yet felt what it's like to just be out, because we can so easily go to the card.
Right.
So all that being said,
Yeah, boy, if you borrowed that $7,000, we wouldn't even know each other.
yeah, it'd be a tragedy. I would have never gone to Maine probably, which would be a tragedy, you know?
Definitely.
So I think that's why I hate it so much. It's not that it's like morally bad or
Right.
anything like that. It's just, it robs people of that creative drive, where what would their brain have conceived if they hadn't just gone to a card, you
Right.
know?
Well, I
So
remember that was, I mean, maybe that was related to what I was doing with this music side hustle, because the first summer, the first time I ever generated any income for myself, I gave private music lessons.
mhm.
And that just is a dipping your toe in the water, and then you're like, maybe there's more, maybe I can do another thing. And that was to solve a debt problem. But I could have just said, well, no, I'll just take a longer time to pay it off. You know what I mean? So, but
Yeah,
I
you
felt
could have just taken,
motivated to get rid of it, so
yeah.
it's the same kind of
I
thing.
mean, you made your resources scarce.
Hmm.
You said, because you're like, I'm going to send this money out to pay off that debt faster. So you were introducing more scarcity into your system. And
Yeah,
then from that, you said, well, I'll accelerate this. I need to bring in more resources.
right.
But we have these resources so readily available where we swipe and we just kick the can down the road always.
Hmm.
Now, hindsight's 2020, and so it's tough to say it now when people, I mean, like, I don't recall in October, I don't recall being on my podcast saying, hey everybody, look out for the pandemic,
Right.
so it's
Truly
like
a
some
once in
stuff
a
you just
lifetime, yeah, event.
you can't see coming, so
Right.
all you can do is operate from a general preparedness stance and
Mhm.
say, well, I won't let that happen again, so I'm going to put more money aside than I used to. I'm going to diversify my income streams more than I used to,
Yep.
things like that. I think we're going to see a lot of that. I feel it for myself, like, oh, there were some things I learned here in the last few months that have changed me,
Hmm.
and I'll behave a little differently.
Right.
So there's no shaming here like you should have, because anyone who said you should have is remembering the past wrong. They didn't see this coming either,
Right.
right?
I don't think anybody could have predicted this. And, Ben and I were live here last week trying to talk about what things people could do, just what kind of jobs are out there. And it's like, it's not the same.
Oh,
It's just a really different world to be looking for work, but that's
yeah,
why I was kind of excited about this, because I really think everybody has something to offer. And I think that it just does a lot for you as a person to realize, wow, I figured out a way to bring in a couple $100 a month or whatever it is, or
yeah,
and maybe it leads to something else that you can't even conceive of right now because you're not
yeah.
on that step yet.
The kids have done piano lessons for years, and we used to drive 12, 15 minutes over to their teacher, and she switched to Zoom because of this whole thing. And then just today she said, we're going to do our group class. They do a little group class once a month with all the students. And she was, instead of kind of trying to say like, we'll practice social distancing, we'll do it right, she just said, we'll just keep it on Zoom. We'll do the group class on Zoom. We did our first piano recital over Zoom a week ago.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit of, there was some technical stuff, but things are changing. I think there will be a new economy that will be remote, that will allow people to offer skills and lessons and teaching that where someone would have never entertained teaching lessons over Skype. But I know that was kind of starting to be a thing.
Right.
But I think we're going to see that be really powerful, and other things like that. So the landscape has changed. I don't think it will go back to where it was even 6 months ago.
Jerry was asking if you would be willing to share what you've learned from the pandemic that's changed your thinking.
Oh, there's a podcast episode. Let me pull it up really quick. Let me pull up my phone. There's a podcast episode that kind of gives you an idea of where I'm coming from. And it's episode 426. This idea that we convert our time into money and our money into food, shelter, or clothing, to put it generally.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, I would like to not have to convert my money to food, shelter, or clothing. I would like to have already some of that next time. And I don't mean like hoarding toilet paper, although that is an instructive example because it
Yes,
happened.
right.
But I mean, I have to feed my kids whether or not I bring in money. And so I don't want an externality to so easily disrupt my ability to fulfill that obligation to my kids.
Mhm.
So part of that was, and this is happening across the United States at least,
Yeah,
everyone's all of a sudden, well, you and I are gardeners already, Aaron, but suddenly we
yeah.
have a lot more friends in the gardening business. And there will be probably a lot of chicks for sale in the next 6 months. And people are like, whoa, I thought I could handle that, and I
That's what my
can't.
sister thinks too, yeah.
Yeah, I think there might even be some greenhouses that'll be for a dime, that you can get. I don't know. But the idea that people are kind of saying they're going to be a little more self-sufficient.
Mhm.
Just, you don't have to be self-sufficient in everything, because that's like one of those big goals, big
Sure.
businesses that you'll never start. But a little bit, you know, that's what I'm doing. So,
The thing for me is too, is I'm trying to do a little more business locally.
mhm. Oh yeah, it's so fun.
I mean, it's much more fun, and they need the support right now, and
Yeah,
I'd rather support the little local shops than, I
yeah,
think making people pay attention to that.
yeah. There was a place that I just discovered that offers produce. I'd never, and it's 10 minutes away from our house. Never knew about it. They sell it out of their garage, and it's all local. I mean, local, like 3 or 4 or 5 hours
Yeah,
away, brought
yeah.
in. And who would have thought, So there's like this back to the land feel that's in the air, at least in this household, that I'm enjoying quite a bit. So
All right, well, I don't see any other questions, so I guess we'll let you go. That was fun.
yeah, that was fun. We should
That's a
do that
topic I
again.
always like to talk about. I firmly believe there's so many teachers out there that have stuff they could be selling. And so I hope somebody comes away with something today. Let us know, drop something in the comments. Let us know if you're inspired to start something. We'd love to hear about it and just give you a little encouragement boost. It's a good thing.
Yeah,
Try it.
absolutely.
Really don't really have a whole lot to lose, I don't think.
Yeah. The,
Awesome.
the thing that I find most motivating as kind of a mantra is nobody knows what they're doing, nobody. And if you go around thinking nobody knows what they're doing, it means you can do anything,
Yep.
right? So everyone's just trying to always figure things out at the highest level. Someone's just trying to figure things out. When someone says, they'll tell me, oh, Jesse, it's amazing this, you've done that. All I think is, I'm just trying to figure this out. And I mean, because you've never done what you're trying to do, almost by definition.
Right.
And so if you can kind of take that attitude, there's I guess it's the opposite of the little bit of ego that you need, is just a kind of well, everyone's just figuring this out anyway. So I can get started,
Yeah.
right?
A little bit of courage and a little bit of humility to learn and tweak and
Yeah.
adjust and know that your idea doesn't have to be perfect.
Oh, it's so far from it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll drop a link in the comments to the Wayback Machine so they can all see.
Oh,
No, I'll make them go hunt for it.
I won't go there. That's for sure. So,
All right. Thanks a lot, Jesse.
okay. Thanks, Aaron. We'll talk to you guys later.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Talk to you. Bye.